Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Volunteer Recruitment, Retention, and Recognition. We are going to go ahead and get started. Everybody is currently muted, and this webinar will be recorded. My name is Colleen Breyer. I'm the Director of Agency Services.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kayla. I'm an Agency Services Coordinator.
And without further ado, let's get started. So we just took a snapshot of what your screen looks like in terms of your panel that you can use to ask questions. You have a question box below, up above over here. You can make your screen full, and then you can raise your hand. And you also have access to the handouts. So we're going to start with the top 10 reasons to volunteer. Number 10, it's good for you. It promotes personal growth and self-esteem. Number 9, it gives hope to others. Number 8, it helps others in need. Number 7, it brings people together. 6, it helps the task get done more effectively. And volunteering strengthens our community. And you learn a lot, of course, and you get a chance to give back. And volunteering emboldens the human spirit. And number 1, you absolutely make a difference. And to all the volunteers on the line, thank you for joining us. We couldn't do this work without you. We're going to start off with some recruitment ideas. We're going to talk a little bit about COVID, but we're going to start with just general ideas. Websites and social media, it couldn't be more important nowadays. Word of mouth from happy volunteers, newsletter and bulletins published by your faith-based community or any other listed below, your interfaith population, village and town, civic organization, garden clubs, local service clubs like Rotary, Lions, Kiwanis, Elks, Moose, they are phenomenal. Not only are they very willing to volunteer, but they're also very willing to provide in-kind donations and financial support. So if you haven't reached out, I highly encourage you to do so. Schools and scouts, community notes in your local newspaper or publication, women's groups like the League of Women Voters, Red Hat Society, Daughters of the American Revolution, Masonic lodges, local businesses and encourage volunteer service with their staff, and speak at above community events and or set up outreach table with information about your program. Create flyers and put them up around town, the library, post office, banks, grocery stores, healthcare centers, community volunteers that are required to participate. And we want to hear from you. Traditionally, this workshop is very interactive. We have a lot of, when we're doing these in person, we have some action plans and we work together to bounce ideas off of one another. And because you're the experts, we would really like to hear from you. So please take a moment to add anything that's worked for you. As we go out throughout the webinar, we're going to have some additional questions for you. So again, we're hoping to make this as supportive and interactive as we possibly can given the circumstances. So please just don't be afraid to use that question box. Is there another place that you've successfully posted your need for volunteers that wasn't mentioned? We're just going to take a couple seconds here. So we're going to move on to our public relations toolkit. So an example of a 5-second spot would be something like, why not give the best? Give yourself. Be a regional food bank volunteer. Contact Colleen Breyer in person or by phone at 518-786-3691 extension 237 or Colleen B at regionalfoodbank.net today. Something very simple. Look for local fairs, festivals, and other places to set up a table and recruit a volunteer to be at these events for you. There have been many requests over the years for us to participate in job fairs and university job fairs. We've gone to several schools, SUNY Albany, Siena, and have set up tables with our literature and provided information seeking volunteers, and that's been very beneficial. Oh, we do have a question, so we're going to interrupt.
Okay, so we have an answer to our first question in the message box. So this is from Robin. So Robin, thank you for submitting this. Something that helped her when she was searching for volunteers was using just the generic email and sending out a request for any email opportunities to every employee that she was able to, and just generating volunteers from that. So that's something she found helpful and a good suggestion for anyone else that has that opportunity.
Great. Thanks, Robin. And again, social media, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, blogs, they're ideal right now for recruiting. And you can also recruit a volunteer to handle those tasks. For those that aren't as savvy with social media platforms, it's always wise to incorporate somebody as a volunteer to handle those tasks. And how to attract new volunteers. Again, flyer, print advertisement, banners, videos, PowerPoints, brochures, send personal invitations, ask your current volunteers what they think. And definitely your local advertiser is a great way. Many people do read their free paper, so definitely something to think about. And press release. The most important 5 points of that are who, what, where, why, and how they should be covered in the first sentence or paragraph. What's your hook? Is it topical, anniversary, new program? Is there an open house? Be concise. You don't need every detail. Keep your sentences simple and short, and list your release date, your contact name, and your cell phone number. Other press tactics include letters to the editor, opinion editorials, news articles, asking for pro bono services from a professional, putting an insert in local paper or newsletter, local hunger or justice group, or faith communities. Pro bono services are definitely out there. We were able to work with some of the videographers at local universities that have helped us create videos for our nutrition education classes. That has been very helpful. We've had some other volunteers come in to assist us with other tasks in the office at an administrative level that's been extremely beneficial. Radio, TV, public service spots, develop short scripts that you can send all your spots typed on one page, and on your letterhead, triple space with a cover letter to the public service director, your targeted local radio and TV stations. You can explain who you are and why the area of your spot would help your organization. And it's really important to follow up via phone call or email just to ensure that they received everything they needed and that they are going to air it. Sometimes they'll say, sure, this is excellent, and then you don't hear back or you don't see anything. So it's important to follow up. And don't forget to include important facts and stats about your agency. Listed below are some examples that we use to provide this information to the community. More than 13,000 total volunteers donated their time in 2020. Over 7.9 million pounds of product was sorted by volunteers, including salvage food, non-food produce, and donated product. 50,720 total volunteer hours at 4 different sites, RFB Main Warehouse, Northway Lane Warehouse, Food Bank of the Hudson Valley, and the Petru Lamb Farm. For those of you that may not know, we had to, and this may come later on as an example as well, but we had to seek out additional warehouse space, not only to house product, but to accommodate our volunteers, because we rely so heavily on those volunteers. I think last year it made up 24.5 full-time employees is what the equivalent of those volunteers meant to us. So I mean, without them, we would not have been able to keep up with the demand. And without that additional warehouse space to accommodate social distancing, we just would not have been able to achieve what we did in 2020. 3,350 new volunteers signed up to help since COVID-19 hit in mid-March 2020, and the food bank increased its distribution by 41%. So these types of statistics, or even graphs or pie charts, if you have somebody who's good with that, really drives it home. People are very interested in that, and it gives them a good feel for what you're accomplishing and how important your work is. And questions to ask yourself in order to start a newsletter: what will your volunteers want to see from it? What information do you want, to give to them? And what is your audience like? Will they be comfortable in your agency's environment? One of the things that Kayla had brought up the other day, which is so true and such a good point, is that many of our member agencies are housed in a shared space, or they're housed in a church or a temple. It's very important that your audience understand that, just to ensure their comfort level, and if there are rules to whatever setting you're located in, that that you're upfront with them about that, so they know what to expect, and to ensure it's a good fit. And do you want your volunteers to have a call to action in the newsletter? How do you want your volunteers to feel after reading the newsletter? And do you want them to be inspired? Do you want it to be somewhat lighthearted, or pull on the heartstrings? Do you want your newsletter to be educational, fun, informative, leisurely, engaging, or a combination of all of these? Now we're going to move on to some recruitment during COVID-19. And because we all don't know how long this is going to last, I think we're getting closer to being out of the woods here with it, but there's just some important tips to be aware of. Depending on the size of your program and financial position, you may want to consider utilizing volunteer management software. We've received a lot of calls and inquiries about this in the last year. We currently use Service. And pricing starts at $25 per month. Again, if you have a donor or somebody who is interested in providing any kind of in-kind service to you, this might be something worth looking into. Utilize and advertise via social media, and work with other organizations and groups to post on their social media pages. So you can work with your local churches or any other organizations or companies that you may be involved with, and you can ask them to assist you by posting on their website. And pre-screen potential volunteers via online meeting platforms such as Zoom, which I'm sure many of you have participated in. Sure, yes. We had a couple of people inquiring about handouts. Yes, we can certainly provide those to you. And request volunteer applications be completed online. Here's some planning tips during the COVID-19 pandemic, and you may want to discuss the following with your current volunteer base. What core services must continue during the crisis? Now, are there new laws or guidelines in place that we have to abide by? So when this started in March of 2020, Matilda's Law, which was an executive order put into effect, it was New York State, for those with compromised immune systems, other health conditions, and those 70 years old and older were asked to stay at home, limit visitors, etc. Those are the types of things that you would want to pay attention to, obviously, because that certainly had a major, major impact on many of our programs and how they operated. Do we have the resources to respond effectively? Do we have the funds, the equipment, and the skills necessary? And do we have the capacity to safely take on new volunteers at this time? Many questions. And not a whole lot of guidance. Things were shifting from one week to the next. There were all kinds of changes. It was really hard to fit it all into one box. As you know, we range in size with our member agencies and geographical location, resources, financial support, all of that makes a difference. Can we structure our volunteer needs in a way that achieves social distancing? And again, that's how we had to accommodate our volunteers, by renting out warehouse space. And we called on a lot of food bank friends to assist us with that. And again, this also depends on what your resources are that are available to you. And with all this in mind, can we respond to the growing needs as a result of the pandemic? Now we're going to move into the 3 R's of the retention ideas. And again, that's what we're talking about today is volunteer recruitment, retention, and recognition. And just remember these 2 things, that recruiting volunteers is not about filling a job, but fulfilling a person. Delegating is not dumping. Delegation means entrusting and empowering. It's just how we delegate that makes the difference. So if a person says yes, our work doesn't end there. Do you currently provide a job description? Do you outline the duties and expectations and timeframes? Do you have a volunteer job application? I'm just gonna go ahead and bring us to that sample of our job application. And this is what we use here at the food bank. It's very simple: name, address, month and day of birth. And the reason why we ask is we do have limitations for younger folks. A cell phone, email, and how you heard about us and why you want to volunteer here, and availability, previous volunteer and work positions. That could be very helpful to determine what might be a good fit for the volunteer, and how much can you lift. That's very important. And references and emergency contact information. Another thing that we offer and what we ask our volunteers to complete is a contact sheet. And it provides similar information as the application, or asks for it rather. And it also asks you to fill out whether or not you want a monthly newsletter, e-newsletter, other mailings, and emergency contact. That's important. Medical alerts, allergies, special needs, and again, with the availability and where their interests lie. So that we've found to be extremely beneficial. And again, name, contact information, volunteer experience, why do you want to volunteer here, days and times available and times that they request, and if this is a trial period or this is going to be ongoing. And do you provide a job interview? Outline your expectations and find out their gifts and challenges. Do you provide job training? Oh, sorry. Let me get back here. A mentor or a buddy is a way to receive feedback. And some programs provide a volunteer handbook, which could welcome the volunteer to the agency. State the program's mission, goals, and objectives. List all tasks for jobs and when they take place. And the USDA civil rights training, so we slid that in there just as a reminder to y'all that work directly with food pantries and soup kitchens, that if you do receive USDA commodities, that all volunteers that work directly with participants are required to take the civil rights training annually. Review expectations, confidentiality, the art of listening, the code of conduct expected, safety requirements, grievance policy, and how someone may be separated from their volunteer job or task. This is very important. Many times I have been asked over the years, oh, we have, and this will come up later on in the presentation to get feedback from you, not immediately, but we will ask this question just so that we can share it with the group. But if there is a particular volunteer who is not really following the code of conduct, or they're kind of going out on their own path, and it's resulting in the task not being completed or not being completed correctly, it's a challenging volunteer. And how do I handle that? They're a volunteer, we need them, but there's been a lot of these challenges, and how do we address it? And some programs ask volunteers to sign a form of agreement. And some programs assign a friend to work with a new volunteer, which I think is also very beneficial. It welcomes them into the position. I think it makes people feel a little less anxious about starting a new job. So it's excellent to pair with somebody who may have similar gifts or personalities. And always be honest in your communications. Be clear about what you're asking. Be aware of lead time needed, what's happening in a person's life. Create a positive environment. And remember that when we gather volunteers and they're given the opportunity to grow and be fulfilled in a volunteer task, we create joy in the people and programs involved. And now I'm going to take you to a sample of a, let's see, this one. Mm-hmm. Excellent. Let me go ahead. Oh, there it is. Tabs, right. Thanks. So Brunswick Cares Community Food Pantry has an excellent manual. So I'm just going to skim through this a little bit. It was updated recently. And it's just one that I've remembered for years because they do such a phenomenal job. I see Patty Duchesne, you're also a participant of this webinar, and your manual is also wonderful. Just had to throw that out there. So they provide a welcome page and contact sheet, which is really helpful. Their mission statement and their goals and objectives. Their pantry hours and how they operate to give you a good understanding ahead of time of what is being offered and how the program works, and their responsibilities, the confidentiality, code of conduct. That confidentiality piece is really important as well to go over with volunteers. I mean, you're gathering personal information, and it's just really important for that to be understood, that it shouldn't be shared. I've had heard of that happening before in years past, where people just don't even think about it, and they're using first and last names, and they're talking to other people, and I'm certain that those folks would not feel comfortable with their information being out there. The art of listening. And again, some of the job descriptions. I mean, it's very informative. Pantry runner, these are all the different types of positions they have available, which is excellent, because if you're not if you're not narrowing it down to just one task, I mean, it allows people maybe to learn multiple tasks, which cannot hurt. Go through these pretty quickly, but again, you'll have access to all of these. And which one was that? This one.
That's the other
Thanks. All right, and back to not from the beginning.
Okay, slide.
Thank you. Still learning all of this. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, did it again.
That's
So
okay.
Go back. Thank you. All right. So moving on to best practices to motivate your volunteers. Challenge them. Challenge your volunteers by delegating tasks, increasing their share of the workload, and providing ways to grow. If they're bored, they're likely not going to want to stick around. Research their talents and try to offer tasks best suited for them. Vary, if possible, vary their tasks, rotate jobs, and change responsibilities. Consult them on important decisions, which may include policies, program goals, projects, special events, new ideas, and suggestions they have. And brighten the workplace, both literally and figuratively. It may not always be the easiest to do, but putting maybe some motivational, inspirational posters up, or adding some color to the space to make it just a little brighter and a little more comfortable to work in. Praise frequently, especially the more active volunteer who may need encouragement the most. And training volunteers so that they feel confident in their tasks and perform them to the best of their ability. You can use seminars, roundtable discussions, volunteer meetings, one-on-one training, periodic evaluations, and mentors. And don't forget to cross-train. That is so important. If anything can happen, if somebody is no longer available for a health condition, it's important that you have somebody else that knows what the roles of, what their tasks were, so that they can step in and ensure that the job gets done correctly. And communicate with a bulletin board, volunteer newsletter, signage, cards, or memos. Make sure everyone involved hears the news and let people know when the next volunteer gathering is, or maybe have a volunteer of the month posted. I don't know, I think maybe the second to the last, we try to incorporate at least one agency spotlight in our agency newsletter a year, but oftentimes we try to get it in there as often as we can. But this certainly can apply to the volunteer of the month as well. And people really enjoy seeing articles about the good work that they're doing. And socialize, if possible, socialize with outside functions, fundraisers, luncheons, parties, and other ways volunteers can feel that they're part of the family. And recognize volunteers with some type of annual recognition event. The food bank used to have all different types of recognition events throughout the year. We did a breakfast a couple of years in a row, and then we would switch it up and do lunches, and we held these for many, many years, and people loved it, and it was always full. And you can do it pretty well on the cheap. It doesn't have to be super expensive. And we're just going to talk about some of the myths, mindfulness, motivations while we're working with volunteers. And some of the most common myths are that people have endless time available. It's so funny because I'm sure that some of you have heard this over the years. I've heard many people say, oh, I'm so ready for retirement. I can't wait. I'm going to relax. I'm going to do more reading. I'm going to do more exercising. And then they find that they're busier as a retiree than they were when they were working. So people don't have endless time, and they are looking forward to having more family time or to traveling. So it's really important to accommodate your volunteers where they're at. And people don't need to be thanked and praised for their volunteer efforts because they're internally motivated, and that's just certainly not true. They want to be acknowledged, and they want to feel good and that they're doing the things that need to be done, and we don't always just know. So it's wise not to assume and to just provide that credit where it's due when it's due. And he or she is too busy. It's not even worth asking him or her. I'm sure people definitely are not always too busy. If they have put in, the time and the effort to review the manual and to apply and to take all the necessary steps that you require of them to become a volunteer, and they obviously want to set aside time to do that. And recruiting volunteers is difficult. And yes, it definitely can be, depending on where you're located. There's all different factors. And again, throughout our 23 county service area, there's different resources available, different size programs, many things. So yes, it can be a challenge, but it doesn't have to be. So that is myth. And people volunteer only out of the commitment or guilt. No one would or could do this particular volunteer task. It's just not true. There's always somebody out there that can get the job done. And when seeking volunteers, be mindful of the following. Ask in person. Match skills and interests to the task of the job. Be specific about the length and depth of the commitment. And this is very important also. We've definitely heard examples of people saying, well, what they didn't realize it would be, something 3-4 times a month. They were hopeful that they would only have to come in as needed. So again, having that all written out and discussed up front is very important. Some motivating factors. Be sure to let your volunteers know what a difference they're making. Make volunteering at your agency a positive experience. And I know some of these are repeats, but we're trying to drive it home. They all are very valuable and important. So you're going to see some duplication here. Help people feel welcomed when they volunteer. And train your volunteers properly, make them feel valued and important. Thank your volunteers properly, recognize them in meaningful ways. Have fun while helping others. Be sure something is accomplished during the time volunteers are present. Avoid unproductive time. And be prepared for your volunteers. There's nothing like going in and not knowing what you're supposed to be doing every time you go in. Be open to and appreciate the ideas and views of your volunteers. And try to understand the personal motivations of each of your volunteers, because they definitely have them. Give volunteers feedback on how they're doing. And try to increase the responsibilities of individual volunteers over time. Provide volunteer tasks that offer opportunities for personal growth and development of knowledge and skill. So we're going to pause for a second. We're going to take a few moments, and I'm really hopeful that some of you have some suggestions. Which of these ideas have you found to be most prolific for your agency in the past? We're hopeful for your comments, and once we get a couple, we will share them. Yeah, 2 to 3 minutes or so. Okay.
All right, everyone, thank you for all your great responses. We have a bunch in here, but we just pulled out a couple that, we saw some common themes in. All right, so I just wanted to share 3 specifically. So Jessica sent in that she finds it really helpful to give her volunteers specific tasks and then allowing them to focus on those certain tasks in the agency. And just to kind of go off of that, if you give your volunteers a couple things to focus on, they can learn those in and out quickly, and then they can begin to, offer ideas and opportunities to grow and then help you in your agency move forward in that direction. So thank you, Jessica, for sharing that. Robin shared that at her agency, her and her volunteers have a monthly meeting, and she makes it, she makes it a point to thank all of her volunteers during this meeting and just assure them that their place in this agency is not taken for granted, and she just really expresses thanks. So actually, she shared that she uses this meeting to recruit and just continue that process on. So that's a good suggestion as well. And then, let's see, Michelle shared that when she has new volunteers come in, she has them shadow a volunteer that is more veteran. So that's a really great idea. And you can even utilize Zoom for this. If you're doing remote tasks, have them Zoom one of your veteran volunteers and troubleshoot, ask questions, and learn from someone who's in a similar position. So even if you can't do that shadowing physically in your pantry or in your agency, always feel free to translate that over to Zoom and do what you can with, the situation. So those are some really good some really good questions, suggestions, and good feedback. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. So ways to recognize. There are several ways to thank volunteers without breaking the bank. The list below provides some ways to recognize and give thanks. Greeting your volunteers by name. Smiling definitely makes a difference. Nobody likes a grumpy Gus. Set up a hospitality space, but just remember, and I know this is a bummer, but remember that food bank product may not be used for the hospitality space. Put out a suggestion box. That has been very helpful here at the food bank for our staff. I think it's been a bit since it's been used, but we did have a suggestion box, and it was, reviewed. It's just an anonymous way to provide feedback. Spotlight a volunteer of the month. Write personalized thank you notes, birthday and holiday cards. Everybody loves a personal card. Praise them to others. That is also an especially good feeling when you walk into a room and somebody is introducing you and praising you in front of somebody you don't know. It is an excellent feeling. And honor their suggestions and reasonable preferences. And plan occasional volunteer recognition, again, events, breakfast, lunch, holiday parties, the bulletin board, important news, schedules, and updates. And there is something missing. Oh, there it is. Sorry. Post a thank you in a free advertiser. Publish a volunteer newsletter. Again, that can be done on one page. Doesn't have to be extremely challenging. Schedule volunteer meetings to discuss experiences and address potential needs. And last but not least, don't forget to say thank you on a regular basis. So again, we're going to open this up again for your suggestions. And how have you worked with and addressed challenging volunteers? One of the workshops that we offer is based not so specifically on volunteers, but conflict resolution. We find that that's very helpful to provide some information on how to work with people that can be very challenging. But we also have volunteers that don't necessarily agree with what we're asking them to do. So what have you done that's worked in the past? We're going to take a couple of minutes. So if you have any experiences or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. Actually, what we're going to ask is if you would like to share, we can unmute you, and it just might be easier for you to express an experience or a way you've handled a challenging volunteer in the past in this manner. So please let us know. Yeah, just type it in the question box and we'll unmute you.
All right, everyone, we're going to wrap up and transition into sharing some of the things that people wrote in the question box. So some of the common themes that we found were kind of coming down to just getting to know your volunteer a little bit more. So knowing them as a person, not just someone who fulfills a role in an agency. And then as you know them as the person they are, you get to know their strengths and how they can serve in the agency to the best of their ability. If they're having trouble or just, having trouble in a certain position, it might just be that they can work better elsewhere. So getting to know them as a person, their strengths, and just engaging in dialogue about how the transition might be necessary can really address the issue and use their strengths to the best of the agency's ability. Somebody also suggested that rotating roles is really good for their agency. So if you have someone who stocks the shelves, if you have someone who meets with clients, moving those positions around, say every time you distribute, can also allow for more cross-training. So if someone's out one day and they're not familiar with how to deal with clients in the agency's desired way, if you're rotating often, then someone can step in and fill that position. So that practice actually works good for two things that we discussed today. So we really like that one. And then somebody also shared that giving more responsibilities to volunteers who are eager and who have been around for a long time can help. Sometimes if people have been around for a long time and they're familiar with the ins and outs of your agency, if they're kind of sticking out as someone who wants to be a little bit more involved, it might just be because they're so capable in their position and maybe they're ready for another challenge. So kind of reframing that in more of a positive manner and then moving them towards another tasks, or looking at it as an area for possible growth, for new projects, just reframing and moving forwards instead of being stagnant with that person's eagerness is something that can be really great to utilize that energy. So we are really happy with all of those answers and all that feedback. So thank you, and feel free to send more stuff in as we go through, and we can share it in our next question time slot as well.
Yeah, we have a couple more questions before we wrap up the webinar. The next is that our network of agencies is definitely diverse, and how would you categorize your agency, and what would you like to share with other agencies of similar demographics? Again, as I had mentioned throughout the presentation, that it's a challenge to address all of our member agencies as a whole group because they are so diverse. You know, one out in our North Country region, say Franklin County, it may be a good 40 minutes before a volunteer can get to the place that they are volunteering at, to the agency they're volunteering at. So that might deter some people from wanting to volunteer. Whereas if you're in an urban setting, and even if you don't drive, there's public transportation that can get you to and from the organization. So those are just is one example of what might be easier for one as opposed to the other, and why that might be a challenge to recruit. So if you could just maybe, again, if you're interested in sharing, please just type in "I want to share" in the question box, and I'll unmute you and you can share with the rest of the group. Or again, you can type in your answers, but we'd love to hear from you. All right, well, we didn't get responses from that, but I am going to take, oh, let's see, Victor actually from Monte Cristi would like to share. So,
all right, so give us 1 second, Victor, and we're going to unmute your mic.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hi, Victor.
Okay, great. Yes. My response was to the previous question about working with challenging volunteers. And the mindset I always have is I never want to get rid of a challenging volunteer. I always want to try to utilize them as best I can. And so I can think of one example in particular where I have a volunteer who is not very good with interpersonal skills and can sometimes make people around them feel uncomfortable. But she has very good attention to detail and seeing things that are wrong or noticing mistakes and things like that. She has a very good set of eyes. And so what I've done is I've moved her away from working in group settings and working with guests, and instead working in inventory management, where her attention to detail skills are incredibly well suited, and she's so helpful to me in the inventory management side of things. And she's no longer interacting as much with volunteers and guests and causing those conflicts.
That's excellent. How did you approach her with the switch?
So it was really sort of casual, and I didn't bring up anything about, oh, it's because you're causing problems or conflicts.
Sure.
It was more, I noticed you're very good at these things. Could you go even further into it? Would you be willing to help out in this area even more so, instead of saying, oh, it's because you're causing problems?
Of course. That's wonderful. That's a really, really good example. And we've certainly had to make adjustments in that way as well around the food bank, because you just don't always know what may be the best fit for somebody until they've been there a little while. So that's a really outstanding example. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Okay, so we have one last question. All right, and can I just,
If you're right, Arrow.
and I'll have to go back to that, right? Current.
Perfect.
All right, so what are some other suggestions you have for the group? What has worked best for your agency? And, we'll just give it a couple of more minutes and then we'll wrap it up. But anything that you have after this webinar, please feel free to reach out to member services, anybody in member services. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have or point you in the right direction. There's a lot of excellent resources available out there and definitely within our network. So I can always point you in the direction of somebody who might be close to you or in your area, or who may share similar experiences that can assist you. So if you have additional feedback, please let us know. We're going to take just 2 more minutes.
All right, everyone. So we've had quite a few answers come in, but we're just gonna, oh, okay, we have some more coming in right now. So we're gonna point out one first from Victor. He's been super helpful. So he was sharing that his agency has a Volunteer of the Year celebration. And what we found special is that the volunteers are nominating someone. So they're nominating each other for that Volunteer of the Year position. So that's really fantastic that they can see these strengths and see this, this really great work amongst each other. And that'll just further create the bond that Colleen was sharing earlier, that family bond and that want to come back and be a part of something bigger in that group effort. So I think that's a really fantastic idea, and I'm glad that you guys are doing that because it just further drives home that you want to build something a little bit bigger than just a volunteer role. It's that that group feeling. We also see, let's see. Oh, somebody shared that it's been really helpful for them to have families volunteer because if they have children, they can recruit those children as volunteers. And if the children have friends, bring them in too. So I think that's a really great idea and something we didn't talk about today. So I'm glad that works for you. And if there are other people, perhaps in a rural area, if you have a family or a few families that can volunteer with you guys, maybe lean on them and just always be open to them bringing in volunteers from their family or family friends, especially when you're far removed from a lot of other people. Let's see here. So Barbara shared that she is using some technology for her agency to have signups for their volunteers. She shared that, and I'll just share exactly what she wrote. We have folks sign up as a 2-person team. We use an online program called Sign Up, and that's one word, that has been very helpful. We have new volunteers trained as a 2-person team with an existing 2-person team. We have had 16 people approach us since October to volunteer. Let's see, we have had 16 people approach us since October to volunteer, and 11 have been trained so far. So it seems like that's working really well for you. And I like that 2-person idea. You can always have someone with you who's on the same page and that you can share and confide in if you ever have any questions. So that's really great and that's really unique. I'm glad that that's working for you, Barbara. That's awesome. Pastor Shirley shared that they have anniversary parties for their volunteers, which is something we do at the food bank for our staff. And I think we just had one yesterday and it was really beautiful, simple, but just a really great time to share and give an emphasis on the importance of, time with an agency and how important that is. So that's really great that you do that. And then just one more. All right. Elizabeth shared that she's using local school districts to get volunteers, especially if there's a mandatory community service component in their graduation. If they have to serve somewhere, why not serve with you? So if you want to reach out to local school districts and try to initiate that relationship and just let them know we're here, and that would be a really great time to have a volunteer handbook, a description of the position, some stuff that can just be laid out for the student as an opportunity to fulfill that requirement if it's something that they are required to do. That would be a really great really great option for anyone that's able to do that with a local school. And again, just keep in mind that a lot of those students will be under 18, so whatever work you do, just make sure it's appropriate and age appropriate. Yeah, I think that's about everything.
Great. Thank you all so much for participating. And as I said, always reach out with any questions or suggestions. If you have anything that could be of value to be added to the webinar for future presentations, we again value your feedback. If you have any other suggestions for trainings that you think would be helpful, what's helpful to you is definitely going to be helpful and beneficial to other agencies. So just keep us posted. We're always here. Reach out. And thank you for all you do. Much appreciated. Take care.